Have you ever looked up at the moon, that quiet, dusty orb, and imagined a future where it's no longer a distant neighbor, but a bustling hub of human activity? It's a vision that's powered by a simple, yet incredible idea: a nuclear reactor on the lunar surface. For decades, it's been the stuff of science fiction, the ultimate solution to the moon's 2-week-long bone-chilling nights. A permanent, reliable power source that could fuel everything from oxygen production to rocket launches. It sounds like the perfect plan, right? The key to unlocking a permanent human presence. But what if I told you this ambitious plan, championed by NASA's Fission Surface Power project, is riddled with technical hurdles, financial pitfalls, and geopolitical risks that could make it one of the most dangerous and misguided endeavors in space history? It's a bold claim, but the deeper you dig, the more you realize that while the concept of a lunar reactor is brilliant, the reality of getting it there is a nightmare of epic proportions. From the impossible deadlines to the hidden dangers, this is the untold story of why NASA's moon reactor isn't just a bold idea. It could be a terrible one. The moon. It's not just a beautiful sight in the night sky. It's a brutal, unforgiving environment. We've been told that solar power is the answer, but how do you keep a lunar base running when the sun disappears for 14 Earth days? The popular myth is that we can just use massive batteries, but that's not only a logistical nightmare, it's an engineering dead end. The energy demands of a sustained lunar colony, with its 3D printers, water processing plants, and life support systems, would require a battery array so vast it would be unfeasible to launch from Earth. The reality is that only a consistent, high-output power source can meet those needs. This is where the allure of nuclear fission comes in. With just a small softball-sized chunk of highly enriched uranium, a reactor could produce as much energy as a freight train full of coal. It's a game changer. But here's the shocking fact. This isn't the first time we've tried this. America's first test reactor in space was launched way back in 1965, and yet decades later, the technology remains incredibly complex and unproven for long-term lunar deployment. What's the connection? We've never had to build a system that can not only survive a rocket launch and a lunar landing, but also operate flawlessly for years in a vacuum with no atmosphere to cool it down. That's a challenge we've never truly faced. It's a whole new ballgame, and it's far more difficult than anyone is letting on. So if we're still working on the basics, what's the real rush? The clock is ticking and the deadline is looming. We're constantly hearing about NASA's goal to have a working reactor on the moon by 2030, a mere 5 years from now. The myth is that this is a realistic, achievable target. The reality? Many experts are calling it cockeyed and overly ambitious. The reason is simple. There are massive technological hurdles that haven't been solved. The proposed 100-kilowatt reactor is still in its design phase, and getting it from a blueprint to a functional flight-ready machine in such a short time is pushing the limits of what's possible. Consider the sheer mass and size. A reactor of that power would weigh tens of thousands of pounds and require a radiator system the size of a basketball court just to dissipate heat. We don't even have a proven lunar lander capable of safely delivering such a heavy and delicate payload to the moon's surface. This is a critical point. The shocking fact is that multiple recent attempts by private companies to land on the moon have ended in crashes. Imagine the catastrophic failure if a nuclear reactor was on board. What's the hidden agenda behind this rushed timeline? It's the new space race. With China aiming to establish a nuclear-powered base by 2035, the pressure is on. But are we sacrificing safety and due diligence just to get there first? It seems like it, because when you accelerate a project of this magnitude, the risks multiply, and the chances for a disastrous outcome skyrocket. So what happens if we fail to meet the deadline? Beyond the technical challenges, there's a massive financial roadblock that could kill this project before it even gets off the ground. The myth is that this is a high-priority, fully funded initiative. The reality is that the proposed budget for the project is estimated at around $3 billion over 5 years, and that's just a starting point. Many critics argue this figure is a wild underestimate. The shocking fact is that a project of this scale could siphon off billions from other critical NASA endeavors, like Earth science, climate observation, and even the James Webb Space Telescope. This is a real concern within the agency, known as the eating their lunch problem, where one massive, expensive project starves others of essential funding. But what if I told you the financial risk isn't just about the development cost? A catastrophic launch failure could result in the loss of billions in taxpayer money, setting back the entire program for years. Think of it as a high-stakes poker game where we're betting the future of our space program on a single unproven hand. So is the reward worth the risk? The journey to the moon is fraught with danger, and the deployment of a nuclear reactor introduces a whole new level of risk. The myth is that nuclear reactors are inherently dangerous, and a single mistake could cause an apocalyptic event on the moon. The reality is that the risks are different but no less serious. The reactor itself is cold and non-radioactive during launch, so a launch pad explosion wouldn't be a nuclear disaster. But the journey to the moon is a different story. The shocking fact is that a failed landing could lead to a breach of the reactor's containment, scattering radioactive material across the lunar surface. While there's no wind or water to spread the contamination, the radioactive debris would create a permanent keep-out zone, rendering a key piece of lunar real estate unusable for future missions. The United Nations Outer Space Treaty of 1967 prohibits the use of nuclear weapons in space, but it doesn't have clear rules for nuclear power generation. The connection to us here on Earth. The long-term risks include the potential for a reactor to be brought back to Earth for disposal, or, in a worst-case scenario, re-enter the atmosphere in an uncontrolled manner, like the Soviet satellite that rained radioactive debris down on Canada in 1978. It's a very real concern that we have to address before we ever send something like this into space. So what's the alternative? The problem isn't just about the dangers of a nuclear reactor. It's about the very real possibility of a new arms race. The myth is that the Fission Surface Power project is purely for scientific exploration. The reality is that it's a high-stakes geopolitical chess game. The shocking fact is that the first nation to successfully deploy a nuclear reactor on the moon could, in effect, create a de facto territorial claim. While international law prohibits the ownership of celestial bodies, the placement of a permanent piece of infrastructure like a nuclear reactor could be used to justify the creation of a safety zone, functionally blocking other countries from accessing that area. The United States is in a race with China, which is also rapidly advancing its own nuclear reactor technology. This isn't just about science anymore. It's about national prestige and strategic advantage. The connection? The push for this project isn't just coming from scientists and engineers. It's a directive from the highest levels of government, driven by a desire to get to the moon first and assert dominance. But is winning the race worth the risk of a new Cold War? The core of the problem lies in a fundamental design flaw that affects all space-based nuclear reactors. The myth is that these reactors are just like the ones we have on Earth, only smaller. The reality is that they have a unique and incredibly difficult challenge: cooling. On Earth, we use massive amounts of water to cool our nuclear reactors, but on the moon, that's not an option. The shocking fact is that a lunar reactor must radiate all of its waste heat directly into the vacuum of space. This requires an enormous, complex, and fragile radiator system, which, as we mentioned, is the size of a basketball court. The design must be able to withstand the incredible temperature swings on the moon, from hundreds of degrees Fahrenheit in the sun to minus 400 degrees at night. This isn't a simple engineering problem. It's a materials science problem that we're still trying to solve. The connection? This design complexity means that if even one small part of the cooling system fails, the entire reactor could overheat, leading to a meltdown on the moon's surface. So, what's the plan to handle this? The challenges don't stop with the design. They extend to the very team tasked with making this happen. The myth is that NASA has an army of experts ready to tackle this project. The reality is that there is a severe shortage of nuclear engineers with the specific skills needed for this kind of work. The shocking fact is that many of the experts who could lead this project have been taking deferred resignations due to a lack of funding and a perception that NASA's priorities were shifting away from big, bold projects. The connection? This brain drain means that the project is likely understaffed and may lack the critical expertise to solve the complex problems that will inevitably arise. And when you're working with nuclear power, a small oversight can have catastrophic consequences. It's a risk we simply can't afford to take. So who will pick up the pieces if something goes wrong? Ultimately, the biggest challenge isn't technical or financial. It's about the public's trust. The myth is that this is a project for the American people, for the good of all humankind. The reality is that it could be perceived as a reckless gamble with taxpayer money and a potential environmental hazard. The shocking fact is that a single high-profile failure, be it a launch accident or a malfunction on the moon, could permanently sour public opinion on space exploration and nuclear power for decades to come. Think about the legacy of Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island. Even a small-scale incident on the moon could have a similar effect on our collective psyche. The connection? NASA's Fission Surface Power project isn't just a mission. It's a test of our collective resolve. It's asking us to put our faith in a technology that has a controversial past, on a timeline that defies common sense, for a prize that might not be worth the cost. Is it worth the risk? If you've made it this far, you're obviously as curious about this topic as we are. Don't let your curiosity end here. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into the most fascinating topics in the universe. And let us know in the comments, what was the most shocking or bizarre fact you learned about NASA's moon reactor? We've explored the myths and realities behind NASA's audacious plan to build a nuclear reactor on the moon. We've seen how the need for a continuous power source is real, but the challenges of a rapid timeline, massive costs, and complex engineering are just as daunting. We've uncovered the geopolitical race for dominance and the very real dangers of launch and deployment. It's clear that while the moon reactor could be a brilliant solution to a tough problem, the path to getting it there is paved with enormous risks. The question isn't whether we can do it, but whether we should. Perhaps the real race isn't about being first, but about being right. What do you think?